The phone call came on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide my life into before and after. My father was dead. Heart attack, they said. Sudden, unexpected, final. The lawyer's voice was clinical, professional, almost bored as he delivered the news that shattered my world. The will reading is scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Your presence is required. Required. As if I were just another item on a legal checklist, not a son mourning the loss of his father. I hadn't spoken to my father in 3 months. Our last conversation had ended in harsh words, accusations flying like daggers across the dinner table. He called me irresponsible, a disappointment. I called him controlling, impossible to please. Now those words hung in the air between us, forever, with no chance for apologies, no opportunity for reconciliation. The weight of unfinished business pressed down on my chest like a stone dot. My brother Marcus called that evening. His voice carried that familiar tone of superiority that had grated on my nerves since childhood. "I suppose you heard," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "about Dad." There was something in his voice, a smugness that made my skin crawl. Even in grief, Marcus couldn't resist asserting his position as the golden child, the successful one, the heir apparent to everything our father had built. The relationship between Marcus and me had been complicated from the start. He was 3 years older, 3 inches taller, and in our father's eyes, 3 times more worthy of love and respect. While I struggled through college, changing majors twice and barely graduating, Marcus sailed through law school and immediately joined a prestigious firm. While I bounced between jobs, trying to find my passion, Marcus climbed the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. Our father never missed an opportunity to compare us, and I never measured up. After our mother died 5 years ago, the divide between Marcus and me became a chasm. Mom had been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over Dad's harsh criticisms and Marcus's condescending remarks. Without her gentle presence, family gatherings became battlefields. Dad grew more critical, more distant. Marcus grew more arrogant, more dismissive, and I grew more resentful, more isolated from the family that was supposed to love me unconditionally. Friday arrived, with the weight of inevitability. The lawyer's office was everything I expected. Mahogany panels, leather-bound books, the smell of old money and older secrets. Marcus was already there when I arrived, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He barely acknowledged my presence, just a curt nod that spoke volumes about his expectations for this meeting. The waiting room felt like a courtroom, where I was already convicted. Marcus sat with the confidence of someone who knew he was about to inherit the world, while I fidgeted with my tie, suddenly conscious of how shabby I must look in comparison. The secretary offered us coffee with the kind of practiced sympathy reserved for the recently bereaved. Marcus accepted with gracious authority. I declined, my stomach already churning with anxiety and dread. Chapter 1 ends here. If you're feeling the weight of family disappointment like I was, leave a comment with the word inheritance below. Don't forget to subscribe to hear how this story unfolds. You won't believe what happens next. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was a man who had clearly spent decades delivering life-changing news with the emotional range of a weather report. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began reading from the document that would determine my future. "To my son Marcus," he began, and I felt my heart sink before he even finished the sentence. "I leave the sum of $2 million, along with the family business and all associated properties." Marcus didn't even blink. He had expected this, probably planned for it, maybe even felt entitled to it. $2 million. The number echoed in my head like a death knell. Our father's life's work, his legacy, his love, all of it measured in dollars and handed to the son who had never doubted his worth. Then came my turn. "To my son David," Mr. Henderson continued, and I leaned forward despite myself, clinging to some desperate hope that there would be something, anything, that proved my father had loved me too. "I leave the sum of $1. The words hit me like a physical blow. $1, not 1,000, not 100, not even 10. One single, solitary dollar. The silence in the room was deafening. Then Marcus laughed. It started as a chuckle, low and mean, but grew into full-blown laughter that filled the mahogany-paneled room with cruelty. $1, he repeated, as if he couldn't believe the beautiful irony of it. Dad really knew how to make a point, didn't he? Chapter 3. The conversation with you, dear viewer, feels necessary here. I know this seems impossible, like something out of a movie, but I promise you this is my real story. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's cruelty ever could. The best part of this story is still coming. Stay with me and don't forget to subscribe. I stumbled out of that office feeling like I'd been stripped naked in public. $1. The message was clear. You are worth nothing to me. You have always been worth nothing to me. And now, even in death, I want the world to know exactly how little I think of you. The humiliation burned in my chest like acid, eating away at whatever remained of my relationship with my father's memory. The drive home was a blur of tears and rage. I pulled over twice, once to vomit on the side of the road, once to scream at the empty sky until my throat was raw. How could he do this to me? How could the man who taught me to ride a bike, who came to my high school graduation, who once told me he was proud of me, how could that same man reduce my worth to a single dollar? That night, I sat in my small apartment staring at the dollar bill Mr. Henderson had ceremoniously handed me. It was crisp, new, probably specially ordered for the occasion. Even in his final insult, my father had been thorough. I held it up to the light, looking for some hidden message, some secret meaning that would explain this cruelty. But it was just a dollar bill, as ordinary and worthless as my father apparently thought I was. Sleep didn't come that night, or the next, or the one after that. I kept replaying every interaction I'd ever had with my father, searching for clues, for signs of where I had gone so wrong. Was it when I dropped out of pre-med to study art? Was it when I got arrested for underage drinking in college? Was it when I couldn't hold down that job at his friend's company? Or was it something deeper, something fundamental about who I was that had always disappointed him? The memories came in waves, each one more painful than the last. I remembered being 8 years old, showing him a drawing I'd made at school. He glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds before turning back to his newspaper. "That's nice, David. Why don't you show your mother?" But when Marcus brought home a math test with a perfect score, Dad would pin it to the refrigerator and call his friends to brag about his brilliant son. I remembered high school graduation. When I finished in the top 10% of my class, Dad shook my hand and said, "Good job." When Marcus graduated law school, summa cum laude, Dad threw a party and gave a speech about how proud he was to have raised such an exceptional young man. The difference in his reactions wasn't subtle. It was a chasm that I could never seem to cross. But there were good memories too, and those hurt even more. I remembered the time he taught me to change a tire when I was 16. His patient hands guiding mine as we worked together in comfortable silence. I remembered him coming to my college art show, standing quietly in front of my paintings for a long time before nodding and saying, "You see things differently than most people, David. That's not always easy, but it's valuable." Those moments of connection made the dollar bill even more incomprehensible. If he had seen value in me once, what had changed? When had I become worth so little in his eyes? The questions tormented me, spinning endlessly through my mind like a broken record that I couldn't turn off. A week after the will reading, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't live with the questions, couldn't accept that my father's final word on my life was worth exactly $1. I needed answers, even if they destroyed me. I needed to understand why the man who had raised me could be so cruel in his final act. I started with his house, the family home where Marcus and I had grown up. Marcus had inherited it along with everything else, but he was too busy celebrating his windfall to bother securing the property immediately. I still had my key from the years when I'd helped Dad with yard work and maintenance. Walking into that empty house felt like entering a tomb. Everything was exactly as Dad had left it. His coffee cup still sat on the kitchen counter, a ring of dried coffee staining the bottom. His reading glasses lay folded on the side table next to his favorite chair. The newspaper from the day he died was still spread across the dining room table. Open to the business section, he read religiously. Every morning, the ordinariness of it all made his absence feel surreal. I climbed the stairs to his bedroom, my footsteps echoing in the empty house. His closet still smelled like his cologne, that woody scent that had meant safety and authority throughout my childhood. I ran my hands along his suits, his ties, his shoes polished to military precision. These were the clothes of a successful man, a man who had built something lasting. Why hadn't he wanted to share any of that success with me? The attic was where I found the first clue. Dad had always been meticulous about record keeping, and boxes of documents were stacked with military precision along the walls. Bank statements, tax returns, business correspondence, the paper trail of a life lived with careful attention to detail. I started going through them systematically, looking for anything that might explain his decision. Most of it was routine financial paperwork. But then I found something odd. In a box labeled Personal -1995, there were bank statements for an account I'd never heard of. The account number was different from any of the family accounts I knew about, and the statements showed regular deposits of significant amounts of money. The deposits had started around the time I was born and continued right up until a few months before Dad's death. The account was with a small private bank I'd never heard of, and the statements were addressed to a P.O. box rather than our family home. This wasn't just another business account. This was something Dad had deliberately kept secret. But why? And what did it have to do with me? I spent the next several days poring over every document in that attic, looking for more clues about the mysterious account. What I found was a pattern of secrecy that went back decades. There were references to meetings with lawyers I'd never heard of, correspondence with financial advisors who weren't part of Dad's usual team, and most intriguingly, a series of handwritten notes in Dad's careful script that mentioned protecting Dee's future and insurance against the worst case. Dee, that had to be me, David. But insurance against what? What worst-case scenario had my father been preparing for? And why had he never told me about any of this? The breakthrough came when I found a business card tucked inside one of the bank statements. It was for a private investigator named Sarah Chen, with a handwritten note on the back in Dad's writing. Retainer paid through 2023. She knows everything. The card was worn, as if it had been handled many times, and the date on the note was from just 6 months before Dad's death. I called Sarah Chen the next morning, my hands shaking as I dialed the number. When she answered, her voice was professional but warm. Chen Investigations. This is Sarah. I introduced myself as David, Robert's son, and there was a long pause on the other end of the line. I've been expecting your call, she said finally. Your father told me you might reach out eventually. Can you meet me this afternoon? There are things you need to know, things that will help you understand why he did what he did. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where conversations could be private and secrets could be shared without fear of being overheard. Sarah was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who had seen enough of life's complications to judge very little. She ordered coffee. I was too nervous to drink anything. Your father hired me 5 years ago, she began. Right after your mother died, he was worried about something that could potentially destroy everything he'd built. He needed someone to investigate quietly, to gather information without alerting anyone to what he was doing. She pulled out a thick folder and set it on the table between us. There was a lawsuit coming, David, a big one. A former business partner was claiming that your father had cheated him out of millions of dollars decades ago. The partner had evidence, documents that could have proven fraud. If the lawsuit had succeeded, it would have bankrupted your father and left both you and Marcus with nothing. My head was spinning, but I never heard about any lawsuit. Dad never mentioned anything like that, because he settled it quietly, Sarah explained. He paid the partner off, but it cost him almost everything. The $2 million he left to Marcus, that's all that was left of the legitimate assets. Everything else had to go to prevent the lawsuit from destroying the family name and leaving you both with massive debts. But the dollar he left me was theater, Sarah interrupted gently. Your father knew that if he left you a significant inheritance in the will, the former partner might come after you too, might claim that you were complicit in the original fraud. By publicly humiliating you, by making it clear that you were estranged from the family business, he protected you from any legal liability. The pieces were starting to come together, but I still didn't understand everything. What about the secret account? The one with the private bank? Sarah smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. That's the real inheritance, David. Your father spent 25 years secretly setting aside money for you. Money that was completely separate from the business. Money that no lawsuit could touch. He was protecting your future the only way he knew how. She handed me a key and a piece of paper with an address. Safety Deposit Box 247 at First National Private Banking. Everything you need is in there: account numbers, passwords, legal documents establishing your ownership. Your father made me promise to give this to you only after the will reading, only after you'd had time to feel the full weight of what he'd done. I stared at the key in my palm. This small piece of metal that apparently held the answers to all my questions. How much? I asked, barely able to form the words. $4.7 million, Sarah said quietly. Plus interest that's been compounding for over 2 decades. Your father calculated that it would be enough to set you up for life, enough to pursue your art without ever having to worry about money again. The cafe seemed to spin around me. $4.7 million, more than twice what Marcus had inherited, money that had been set aside specifically for me, protected and hidden, and kept safe through years of legal threats and financial uncertainty. My father hadn't abandoned me. He had been protecting me in the most elaborate way possible. There's more, Sarah continued, pulling out an envelope sealed with wax. He wrote you a letter. He made me promise to give it to you only after you knew about the money, only after you understood what he'd done and why. I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written across the front in Dad's familiar handwriting, and below it, a single word. Finally, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. My father's voice speaking to me from beyond the grave. My dear David, it began. If you're reading this, then Sarah has told you about the money, and you finally understand that everything I did was to protect you. I know the will reading was painful. I know you felt abandoned and unloved. I know that $1 felt like the cruelest joke a father could play on his son, but it was the only way to keep you safe. The letter went on to explain everything, the lawsuit, the threats, the years of careful planning to ensure that both his sons would be provided for despite the legal challenges. But it was the final paragraph that broke my heart and healed it. At the same time, you were never the disappointment, David. You were never worth less than your brother. You were the son I worried about most, because you had the biggest heart, the most sensitive soul, the greatest capacity for both joy and pain. Marcus will do fine with his inheritance. He has the ruthless streak necessary to protect wealth. But you, my artistic son, my dreamer, my gentle boy, you needed something different. You needed security without the burden of expectation, freedom without the weight of family obligation. The money is yours to do with as you please, but more than that, it's proof that I loved you enough to sacrifice my own reputation to keep you safe. I sat in that cafe and cried, like I hadn't cried since I was a child. All those years of feeling unloved, all those moments of comparison and criticism, all the pain of never being good enough, it had all been an elaborate performance designed to protect me from something I never even knew existed. The next day, I went to the bank and accessed the safety deposit box. Inside were all the documents Sarah had promised, plus something extra, a small wrapped package with another note. From Dad, for your first gallery showing. The note read, I always believed in your talent, even when I couldn't say so. Inside the package was a vintage camera, the same model Ansel Adams had used for his most famous photographs. It must have cost a fortune, and Dad had bought it years ago, waiting for the right moment to give it to me. The moment when I would finally understand that his love had never wavered, even when his words and actions suggested otherwise. I called Marcus that evening. The conversation was awkward at first. We hadn't spoken since the will reading, and I could hear the smugness in his voice as he asked how I was coping with my inheritance. When I told him about the secret account, about Dad's real plan, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. 4.7 million, he repeated, and I could hear the shock in his voice. But why didn't he tell us? Why did he let us think? Because he was protecting both of us, I explained. You from the knowledge that the family fortune was built on shaky ground, me from the legal consequences of that foundation. He gave you the business and the reputation. He gave me the freedom to be myself without worrying about money. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable than I'd heard it since we were children. I always thought he loved me more, he admitted. I thought that's why he was so hard on you, because he'd given up on you. But maybe he was just trying to prepare me for a different kind of life. Maybe we both got exactly what we needed, I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it. The revelation changed everything between us. Marcus and I began talking regularly, really talking, not just exchanging pleasantries at family obligations. We talked about Dad, about Mum, about the pressure we'd both felt to live up to impossible expectations. We talked about the future, about what it meant to be brothers instead of competitors. I used some of the money to buy a small gallery space downtown. the kind of intimate venue where emerging artists could show their work without the pressure of commercial success. I named it Second Chances in honor of Dad's elaborate plan to give me exactly that. The opening night was everything I'd dreamed of. My paintings on the walls, people genuinely interested in the work, sales that proved I could make it as an artist. Marcus came to the opening, bringing his wife and kids, making a point of introducing me to his colleagues as my brother, the artist. It was the first time he'd ever sounded proud of what I did, and I realized that Dad's plan had freed him too. Freed him from the burden of being the only successful son. Freed him to see me as a person rather than a disappointment. But the most important change was in how I remembered my father. The harsh words, the constant criticism, the years of feeling unloved, I could finally see them for what they really were. They were the price he paid to protect me, the sacrifice he made to ensure my future. Every time he'd been cold to me, in public, every time he'd dismissed my achievements, every time he'd made me feel small, it had all been part of an elaborate performance, designed to keep me safe from forces I never knew existed. The dollar bill sits framed on my desk now, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a symbol of the most complex love I've ever known. It represents a father who loved his son so much that he was willing to be remembered as cruel rather than risk that son's future. It represents sacrifice and protection, and the kind of long-term thinking that only comes from truly understanding what matters most. This story taught me that sometimes the cruelest actions can hide the deepest love. My father didn't abandon me, he protected me in a way that only he could understand. What do you think about this story? Do you believe my father did the right thing? Leave me your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories that will make you reflect on life. Sometimes the people we think have hurt us the most are actually the ones who have loved us the best.